Turn around. That's what my sister said to me, her hand on a pair of handcuffs while our entire family watched from the dinner table. And in that moment, I wasn't her sister anymore. I was her suspect. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I'm 39 years old. For most of my life, my story has been buried in silence and classified files. Now I'm finally ready to tell it. Before I begin, I just want to know that someone is out there. If you're listening, just type, "I'm here" in the comments. Or let me know what part of the world you're in. After so many years of being misunderstood by my own family, it means more than you know to feel heard. Don't forget to subscribe to follow this journey, because sometimes the deepest scars aren't from any battlefield. Thank you for being here. Now, this is what happened. For you to understand how my world collapsed into the cold click of steel around my wrists, you need to know how it began. Not with an explosion, but with the quiet tear of an envelope 3 days earlier. The summons arrived on a Thursday. Not a text, not an email, but a physical letter, a relic from a past I had surgically removed myself from. The stationery was thick, expensive, with floral patterns embossed in the corners. Chloe's signature move when she wanted her authority to feel like grace. The message inside was a simple command in her pretentious cursive dinner at Nana's Sunday 6:12 p.m., family only. The return address was a ghost Sanford, North Carolina. I stood in my barracks, the paper feeling heavier than it should. My roommate, Captain Maya Singh, whistled from her bunk. "Damn, Vance, you look like you just got orders for a solo mission to hell." "Worse," I muttered, the paper crinkling. "Family dinner." She laughed. "I'd take another tour in Mosul over my family's holiday dinner. At least over there you know who's shooting at you." I shoved the letter in my locker, but it was no use. Its weight lingered, the weight of a guilt I refused to acknowledge. After our father died, I ran off to chase a career in the shadows, while Chloe stayed behind, becoming the family's martyr. They called me the golden daughter who made it out. I knew I was just the one who escaped. By Saturday, I decided one night of my life was a small price to pay to silence the ghosts. I filed leave with the DIA and packed a single civilian outfit, a uniform of anonymity. My training taught me how to disappear into crowds. Doing it with your own blood is just a more advanced form of camouflage. Sanford felt like a photograph that had faded, shrunken, suffocating. The cab driver eyed me in the rear view, trying to place the familiar stranger. I was a visitor from another planet, returning to a world I no longer fit in. And then I saw it. Chloe's police cruiser parked with perfect, deliberate precision in front of Nana's house. The chief's seal gleamed on the door. She'd gotten her throne. Nana opened the door, her hug frail but fierce. "Don't take the bait, Ellie," she whispered, a warning that confirmed my deepest fears. She knew. The house smelled of cinnamon and pot roast, a museum of my childhood. But the exhibit had changed. A gaudy new chandelier. Chloe's taste hung overhead. And Chloe herself stood by my mother. Her arms crossed, her badge on her hip like a prize. Mom just looked tired, a portrait whose colors had faded. The power dynamic was a battlefield map. Chloe had claimed the head of the table, a seat that had always been Nana's, who was now relegated to the far end. "Look what the cat dragged in," Chloe said, her voice a weapon sheathed in silk. "Good to see you too, Chief." I returned the title, a subtle jab. She didn't like it. My training kicked in. I played the part of the oblivious guest asking about kids and complimenting the food, but my eyes missed nothing. Through the window's reflection, I saw him, a man across the street pretending to walk a dog that never sniffed a thing. His gaze was fixed on our house. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an operation. I met Chloe's gaze. The anger was gone, replaced by a chilling satisfaction. It was the look of a predator whose prey had just walked into the trap. She tapped her wineglass, the sharp ding silencing the room. "Before we eat," she announced with false cheer, "I have something to share." I remained perfectly still, my heart rate steady. This was the ambush. I sipped my water, leaned back, and gave her the calm, detached audience she so desperately wanted to shatter. Her smile was condescending, her voice a rehearsed performance. "There's an important matter I need to address." She produced a manila folder, an evidence file, at Sunday dinner. "This," she declared, holding up a document, "is an application for military ID credentials, submitted under the name Eleanor Vance. It contains a forged DD Form 214 and a fabricated security clearance." The air left the room. My mother whispered a faint, "What?" Chloe's eyes drilled into mine. "Eleanor Vance, I am placing you under arrest for impersonating a federal officer and theft of government property." Silence. A collective gasp. Aunt Sarah clutched her chest. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice flat. Her hand was already on the cuffs. "Turn around." Nana shot up. "Chloe, for heaven's sake, what are you doing?" "This is official, Nana," she snapped. "She is not who you think she is." I didn't resist. I stood, my movements slow and deliberate, as she circled the table. She pulled my arms behind my back with a rough, practiced motion, the cold steel of the cuffs biting into my wrists. She made them deliberately tight, a rookie move meant to inflict discomfort and assert dominance. "She's been lying to all of you," Chloe announced to the stunned room. I scanned their faces. Shock, confusion, and on some dawning, terrible belief, not one person moved to stop her. Not even my mother, who sat frozen, her hands limp in her lap, a silent accomplice. "You really believe I faked a 20-year military career?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She held up her badge like a shield. "You've been a ghost. You disappear for years, you never say where you work. We're just supposed to accept it. I never asked you to accept anything." "No," she shot back, her voice finally cracking with years of resentment. "You didn't. That's the problem." This was never about the law. It was about the little sister who felt abandoned. The folder was just her script. "It's all in here," she said, shoving it toward the table. "This isn't personal. It's legal." "Then you should have called the JAG Corps," I stated calmly. She flinched. "You know perfectly well a stolen valor claim is a military matter. It's not in your jurisdiction." "You broke federal law on my turf," she insisted, her authority wavering. "That's not how jurisdiction works, Chief," I replied. The cuffs dug deeper, but I would give her nothing. My spine was straight, my face a mask of discipline. This was just another hostile interrogation. The enemy just wore my sister's face. I glanced at Nana. Her trembling hands told me everything. "Transport will be here in the morning," Chloe announced, breathless now that her main act was over. A phone camera flashed Uncle Kevin documenting the family drama. I stood there, a prisoner in my own home, humiliated and silent. And across the street, the man with the fake dog was gone. My real mission had just begun. I shifted my weight slightly enough to press my hip back into the edge of my belt. Just enough pressure to activate the signal. It vibrated once. Confirmed. And I kept my eyes straight ahead like none of it mattered. The cuffs were tight enough to make my fingers tingle. But I didn't flinch. I'd had worse sand sweat blisters, 20-hour debriefs. Pain was never the point. Pain was just part of the noise. The point was control. And Chloe thought she had it. What she didn't know was that 3 weeks before that dinner, she'd broken into my rental property in Alexandria. She didn't do it herself, of course. She paid someone else a low-level PI, no license outside Virginia. The kind of guy who thinks opening a deadbolt qualifies as surveillance work. He used a fake utilities badge to get inside, claimed he was checking wiring for code violations, slipped past the landlord by dropping my name, said I had military connections, and he was just there on my request. No one asked questions. The attic was locked with biometric access, but the backup manual override was still in place. I left it for emergencies. He found it, clicked it open, and that's when the panic set in. Inside the attic were storage crates, government-issued, triple-tagged, locked, marked with barcodes and numeric codes. That, if you actually knew what you were looking at, were completely legal and matched Department of Defense transport documentation. But to someone like him, to someone like Chloe, it looked like evidence. He took photos, opened one of the crates, found encrypted drives, deployment manuals, and sealed black pouches marked Field Notes Classified. One even had Arabic scribbles on the label. He sent everything to Chloe that night. And to be fair, if you hated me enough and had no military clearance, you might believe what he believed. That I was running a stolen valor op, that I was sitting on a pile of fake materials to boost some made-up resume, that I was playing soldier with real weapons. Chloe didn't question the PI's methods. She didn't verify chain of custody, didn't check the documentation, didn't notify federal authorities. She just printed everything, organized it into a folder, and rehearsed a speech for family dinner. I know this because 2 days before the dinner, the PI's assistant, who apparently had a conscience, sent a redacted email to my DIA field office. The subject line was, "Potential Compromise Vance Family." It reached Fort Liberty the next morning, but by then, I was already en route. And since my own records were flagged under sealed operations, the review process took time. They didn't connect the dots until after I'd already stepped into Nana's house. Chloe thought she was building a case. What she was actually doing was tampering with federal intelligence materials, and not just any materials. The crates in the attic weren't mine. They belonged to a cross-agency strike unit that had just completed a classified overseas recovery. I'd been tasked with custody during the transfer window. The mistake was thinking I could keep them secured at a private site for 48 hours. That was my call. And now, it was a federal headache. Not because Chloe had proof of wrongdoing, but because she'd accidentally exposed something she couldn't possibly understand. From her point of view, she was the hero. She saw me as the sister who disappeared, who got the spotlight, who never told the truth, who returned home with nothing to show for her stories, but cash scars and secrets. She assumed the worst, and in her mind she was protecting the family, which is why she didn't blink when she broke the law. She thought she was saving face, except she had no clue what she just stepped into. The PI tried to warn her. The night before the dinner, he sent her a voicemail. "Look, I don't know what your sister's into, but this stuff doesn't feel right. Maybe leave it alone." She deleted it. She wasn't backing off now. She had a folder, a captive audience, and 2 decades of resentment bottled up in that police uniform. And once she locked those cuffs, she felt like she'd won. But the signal I triggered had already left the house. The vibration on my belt confirmed a GPS ping and a priority alert routed through Fort Liberty's internal channel. They wouldn't send a full team right away. They'd confirm identity first. They'd review protocols. Someone would get briefed. An officer would be assigned. Still, the process had started. My face stayed neutral. Chloe was pacing now, giving a speech about honor and the law and consequences. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about the attic and how she had no idea what those crates really contained. Not even the PI opened the second layer of containers. If he had, he would have found biometric readers, encrypted laptops, and intel files that hadn't even been decrypted by the DIA yet. One of those files was a record from an extraction in Syria. It involved names, some American, some not. It was raw, sensitive, unfiltered. The fact that a civilian had touched any of it was already a problem. The fact that Chloe had rented pieces of it and brought them to a family dinner, that was felony territory. But none of that mattered to her. Not now. Not in her eyes. To Chloe, this was her chance to finally expose me. She saw it as justice. I saw it as something else entirely, because the more she talked, the more she told on herself, not legally, emotionally. This wasn't about law enforcement. It was about family, about old wounds, about control, about someone who stayed and hated that I left, about someone who buried her resentment in responsibility, about someone who couldn't stand that I became something she couldn't define. She didn't need truth. She needed to win, and she thought she just had. I kept my eyes forward, letting her voice fade into the background noise, the way I used to when air raid sirens blared during debriefs in Bagram. Noise was fine. Noise meant I wasn't being touched. 3 days before the dinner, I was sitting across from Dr. Samuel Evans, the base therapist, a 50-something Navy vet, sharp enough to smell deflection before I opened my mouth. "You're back stateside. Final assignment wrapped. Any reason you're still requesting ops level clearance?" he asked, flipping through my file without looking up. "I prefer not to get rusty," I said. "You've spent 14 out of the last 16 years in active intelligence. Rust is not your problem." He was right. Fatigue was. He tapped the desk. "Nightmares, nerve flashbacks. No. Do you jump when a door slams? Only if it's attached to a drone." He smiled at that, but I didn't. He leaned forward. "Let me guess. You're requesting field retention because you don't know what the hell to do with yourself, unless someone's depending on you to keep secrets." I said nothing. He nodded. That's what I thought. He was wrong about one thing, though. It wasn't the secrets that kept me grounded. It was the silence. Being invisible gave me control. Talking made everything messier. I hadn't planned to speak at the dinner. I didn't want to defend myself to a room full of people who already decided I was the family disappointment, dressed in military cosplay. People like Chloe didn't want the truth. They wanted proof they were right. But therapy taught me something. Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's the only leverage you've got left. Dr. Evans closed my file. "You need to confront what you've been avoiding. Go see them. Not for them, for you." He meant my family. I thought maybe he was right. That was 2 days before Chloe made me a suspect in my own life. Back then, I thought the worst thing that could happen was an awkward meal and some passive-aggressive digs about how I never call or think I'm better than this place. Turns out, the worst thing that could happen was being falsely arrested by your own sister while your mother watched and said nothing. At Fort Liberty, they don't train you for that. They train you for minefields, not family dinners. They teach you how to spot body language shifts in potential hostiles, not how to read your mom's face when she quietly agrees with your arrest. They teach you how to build intelligence dossiers on foreign assets, not how to process the look on your Nana's face when she realizes her favorite granddaughter just got cuffed in front of the china cabinet. But I didn't need training for any of that. I just needed to keep breathing and remember what Dr. Evans said. You don't owe anyone clarity. You owe yourself peace. So I stood there, back aching wrists screaming and eyes dry as the damn desert. No apology, no explanation, just stillness. Let Chloe burn out her righteous indignation. Let the cousins gasp and whisper and text under the table. Let the photos circle the room, probably posted by now on some social media group for retired PTA moms and bored divorcees who live for small town scandal. Let it all happen. Because the one thing nobody noticed while Chloe was playing cop and judge and martyr was the way I kept shifting my stance. Just a little, just enough to count seconds in my head. 12 minutes. That's the average response time when a priority signal hits Liberty's internal routing. 6 to confirm identity, 3 to assign a handler, 3 to move. That number ran in my head like a metronome. And while everyone else in that room was watching me fall apart, I was counting. 12 minutes wasn't long, but long enough to remember what the scars felt like. Not the physical ones, I'd buried those under layers of muscle sand and discipline. I meant the ones from the year Dad died. When Chloe shut me out, handled the funeral without me, made decisions like I didn't exist. When Mom stopped asking when I'd come home. When I realized the only time I was mentioned in the house was when someone needed a warning for what not to become. Those scars didn't show up on psych evals. They didn't earn medals or therapy vouchers. They just sat there, waiting for a night like this to open up again. And while Chloe thought she was delivering justice, all she really did was confirm what I'd already known for years. This family wasn't mine anymore. The Army never fixed that. But it did give me a place where loyalty wasn't a coin toss, where orders meant something, where truth wasn't whatever made you feel superior at the dinner table. So I stood still, let them watch, let them think I was broken, and I kept counting. I shifted my stance again, slow and natural, like someone adjusting to leg cramps. Chloe didn't notice. She was too busy holding court. Some of you may think this is extreme, she said, pacing behind the table now, like a speaker at some small-town leadership conference. But you haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't found what I've found. She tapped the folder again for effect. Uncle Kevin leaned over to squint at the papers, like he suddenly understood federal documents. He didn't. I had to make a choice, Chloe said. Let this continue or stop it now for all of us. Mom looked down at her lap. I couldn't tell if she agreed or just didn't want to be part of this. Dinner was still technically happening, though no one was eating anymore. Mashed potatoes were going cold. Rolls sat untouched. Someone had poured gravy and then abandoned the spoon midair. It dripped slowly unnoticed onto the linen tablecloth. Nana's linens, the ones she only brought out on holidays. Chloe had hijacked the entire evening, like it was her own personal award ceremony, and the prize was proving I didn't belong. I spotted Cousin Jessica sliding her phone under the table to film. She was trying to look subtle. She wasn't good at it. Someone else coughed awkwardly, probably hoping to reset the tension. It didn't work. Chloe leaned forward, both hands planted on the table. "She's not a general," she said firmly. "She's not even enlisted anymore. Everything she told us was fake. All of it." Then she looked at me. "Well, are you going to deny it?" I blinked once, slowly. "You sure you want me to speak?" Chloe crossed her arms. "Go ahead. Enlighten us." I looked around the room. No one objected. No one defended me. Even Nana looked away. Her knuckles were white around the edge of her water glass. "I have nothing to say," I said, clear and calm. Chloe scoffed. "That's what I thought." She turned back to the table, triumphant. Someone at the far end mumbled, "This is messed up." Chloe ignored them. She was back to her performance. "I did what needed to be done," she continued. "You all deserve to know who she really is." The thing is, no one in that room actually wanted the truth. They wanted something easier. A scapegoat, a distraction, a reason to explain away their own choices. I'd become that reason. Convenient, silent, distant enough to doubt. And if you pile enough suspicion on someone for long enough, they stop being family. They become a myth. I could have pulled rank. I could have rattled off clearance codes, mission names, field designations, things that would have made Chloe backpedal so fast she'd knock over Nana's wine glass. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew the truth wasn't for them. It never had been. You don't explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You just let them talk until they run out of ammo. Chloe hadn't run out yet. She shifted gears again. "3 weeks ago," she said, voice dropping to dramatic mode, "I received a tip from a private investigator. Anonymous source said Eleanor was hiding government property in a private home. Weapons IDs, classified materials. I verified everything myself." Aunt Sarah gasped again. Always good for a gasp. "She had crates locked, sealed, marked. I have photos. I have timelines. And I have sworn statements." I tilted my head slightly. "Sworn by who? Your PI?" Chloe's jaw flexed. "Don't. I'm just asking. You want the truth out here right in Nana's house, next to the gravy boat." She stepped toward me. "You think you can intimidate me because you show up here with your silence and your mystery and your superiority complex? No. I think you feel small and you don't know what to do with it." That landed. She took half a step back. Someone cleared their throat again. Jessica kept filming. I looked at Nana. She was still staring at her glass like she could time travel through it. Then I looked at Mom. She finally met my eyes, and she said quietly, "Why didn't you just tell us what you do?" I answered honestly, "Because it wouldn't have made a difference." Mom blinked but didn't deny it. I could see the gears turning in Chloe's head. She wanted control back, wanted the room to realign behind her. She needed to feel right. So she raised her voice again. "I spoke with someone in the sheriff's office. They confirmed you never served under that name. I checked the Dovier database. Nothing. You've been lying to everyone for years. The sheriff's office doesn't have access to DEA personnel records." She froze. She didn't know that acronym. Not really. But the people who mattered did. And just like that, I saw the brief flicker of doubt behind her eyes. She thought she'd done her homework. She didn't realize she was working off the wrong syllabus. Across the street, the fake dog walker was gone, which meant the next phase had already started. But here in the dining room, the performance kept going, and I let it. The click of her heels against the hardwood was deliberate now, louder than it needed to be. She moved back to her chair, grabbed something from her side, and turned to the room like she was conducting a damn press conference. Her hand rested on the cuffs again. "This isn't just a family issue anymore," she said. "This is criminal." No one stopped her, not even Nana, not even Mom. She took a breath and said it. "Eleanor Vance, you're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer, fraud, and unlawful possession of government property." Her voice was steady, performed. She didn't just want to arrest me. She wanted everyone to remember the moment she did it. I didn't blink. She came around the table again, motioned for me to stand. I was already standing. She positioned herself behind me, pulled my arms back, and double-locked the cuffs tighter this time, like she thought I might run. If I wanted to run, I would have done it years ago. I heard someone at the table whisper, "Oh my God," but no one moved. Nana finally said, "Chloe, you don't have to do this here." "Yes," Chloe snapped. I do. She took a step forward, pulled out her badge, held it up like it was a crucifix warding off sin. "I'm acting under the authority of the Sanford Police Department. This is official. I've logged the charges. Transport will arrive tomorrow morning." I turned slightly. "You already filed paperwork?" She didn't answer. "Who signed off?" Still nothing. Of course not. There were no signatures. There was no paperwork. She jumped the chain of command, skipped due process, and acted unilaterally. Because this wasn't about law. It was about power. She wanted to humiliate me, make an example, prove to the people at this table that she was the one in control now. And it was working. Cousin Jessica had stopped filming. Even she looked a little freaked out now. Uncle Kevin put his fork down finally. "You're really arresting her?" he asked. Chloe didn't look at him. "Yes." "For what exactly? She's a fraud. I've shown you the evidence." Kevin leaned back. "You showed us some papers you printed. That's not evidence. That's homework." Chloe's jaw clenched. "She's not who she says she is," she said again. "And who does she say she is?" I asked. The room went quiet. Exactly. I hadn't claimed anything. I hadn't even told them what branch I served in. Chloe had made the whole thing up from motive to headline, and now she was trying to execute the ending she'd written. Mom finally stood up. She looked unsure, like she didn't want to pick a side. "Maybe we should all just calm down." Chloe turned to her, betrayed. "You're taking her side." "I'm not taking anyone's side. She lied to all of us." "You don't know that," Mom said softly. It was the first real doubt I'd seen in her voice in years. Chloe was unraveling, not publicly. She was too controlled for that. But I could see it in her eyes. She'd built the entire narrative around the idea that everyone would believe her. She didn't prepare for the silence. She didn't prepare for people not clapping when she dropped the punchline. She didn't prepare for me to just stand there. "You're lucky I'm not calling the news," she said, voice sharper now. "They'd love this story. Decorated officer turns out to be fraud exposed by her own sister. Think how fast that would go viral." "Then call them," I said. "Let's get some real cameras in here." A few heads turned. Jessica perked back up. Chloe faltered. "Don't tempt me." "You already did," I said. "You just didn't expect the lights to swing back your way." She looked at the cuffs again, like they were supposed to mean something more than just steel and ego. "They're real," she muttered. "Yeah," I said. "So, is what you just did. And you better hope it was legal." She didn't respond. The room felt heavier now, like everyone finally realized this wasn't just a dramatic sibling fight. This was official documented, and if I pressed it, actionable. Nana cleared her throat again. "Chloe, what happens now?" Chloe didn't answer right away. "I'll transport her in the morning," she said. "Process her at the station file charges formally. Then what?" I cut in. "You send me to trial. You testify, you go under oath with this made-up file." She looked at me, eyes narrowed, voice low. "I'm not making anything up." I took a slow breath. "Okay." That was all I said. Not a threat, not a warning, just a single quiet confirmation that everything from here on out was her responsibility, not mine. She'd crossed the line, and while she was too proud to see it yet, everyone else was starting to notice. Across the street, a black SUV had pulled up. No lights, no sirens, just a quiet presence, the kind that didn't knock before entering. The SUV stayed parked. No one else noticed it. Everyone inside was too busy looking at me, like I'd finally been unmasked, like Chloe had ripped off some disguise they were all too afraid to question until now. I could feel the shift in the air. No more whispers, no more side glances, just a slow, collective acceptance that maybe Chloe had been right all along, and that maybe I had, in fact, brought this on myself. Uncle Kevin wouldn't meet my eyes. Aunt Sarah leaned into her wine like it might explain things for her. Even Nana, who knew better, looked away. She had always been the one to vouch for me when I was gone too long or missed another Christmas. But now, her silence felt like a resignation letter. Chloe stood taller. She fed off it. She turned toward Mom like she needed a final blessing. "You know, I wouldn't have done this without reason." Mom nodded. Not big, just enough. It was the nod that killed more than anything anyone said. It didn't scream betrayal. It whispered it. I stood there, cuffed, body relaxed, face unreadable. And I made a choice. I wasn't going to explain anything, not to them, not here. Not in a room where the people who shared my blood were more interested in being comfortable than being right. Chloe walked over to the table and picked up her wine glass, like this was the end of something. She toasted, no one sipped, and then she said, "Okay, let's eat." The room hesitated. Then, like someone had thrown a switch, plates began to move. Food got passed. Forks clinked. The performance was over. The audience returned to their meal. And I stood there in handcuffs while the people who raised me bit into pork roast like this was a completely normal Sunday evening. I heard Jessica whisper to her brother, "Well, at least it's not as bad as Aunt Brenda's divorce dinner." He laughed. I didn't. No one offered me a seat. No one asked if I was hungry. No one said, "Are we seriously going to do this with her standing there like a prisoner?" It wasn't shock anymore. It was belief. And the most dangerous kind of belief is the kind built on familiarity. They knew Chloe. She'd been there. She'd taken care of Nana after her fall, helped Mom through the mortgage fiasco. She'd shown up. I hadn't. I left. I came back a few times, sure, but only when I had the clearance, the time, and the mental energy to brace for whatever cold reception was waiting. I'd always kept it short, polite, distant. And that distance was exactly what Chloe had used against me. You make yourself scarce long enough, they forget who you are. They remember what's convenient. So now, I was the sister who lied, the daughter who faked it, the officer who never was. Chloe had handed them the story, and they didn't just accept it. They signed their names at the bottom. I shifted slightly to relieve pressure on my wrist. Jessica finally noticed. Are those actually tight? Chloe answered before I could. They're standard. She's fine. She's not exactly resisting. Jessica said, her voice smaller now. Chloe didn't respond. She was already reaching for the gravy. I locked eyes with Jessica just a second, enough for her to look away. The moment passed, and just like that, the cuffs stopped being shocking. They just became part of the background, like the wallpaper or the crystal pitcher or the chipped bowl. Everyone pretended wasn't chipped. My body was saying nothing, but my mind was awake, counting seconds, listening for vibrations. The SUV hadn't moved, and that meant one thing. They were inside already. Not in the dining room, not yet, but in the house, or somewhere watching from closer than anyone realized. I'd triggered the ping nearly 15 minutes ago. Someone, somewhere, in a nondescript office building had read the alert, flagged it for priority, and sent the first wave. Quiet, observational. This wasn't a movie. No one was kicking down doors. No black helicopters. No shouting. The first move in an internal breach is always silence, then confirmation, then presence. And right now, they were confirming. The only real question was who they'd talk to first, Chloe, Nana, or me. I didn't care, because whoever it was, they wouldn't come through the front. They'd enter through the gap in the basement Chloe never fixed, or the back porch, where the screen door never latched, or the cellar that still had the broken lock Grandpa swore he'd replace before he died. They knew the layout. We always did recon on our own. That's what happens when your career lives inside operations, where failure means funerals. So I waited. Let them eat, let Chloe gloat, let Mom sip her tea with that blank stare she always used when she didn't want to admit she'd picked the wrong side again. I didn't need anyone to defend me anymore. I'd spent years being the villain in their version of the story. Tonight didn't change that. It confirmed it. But confirmation works both ways. And across the room behind Chloe's self-satisfied smile, I saw the first flicker of unease, the kind that shows up when you realize the room is too quiet, the kind that means something's off. She didn't know what yet, but she felt it. Chloe was chewing slowly, fork resting against her plate, like she'd finally earned her seat at the head of the table. Her badge was back on her belt, half covered by her cardigan, like she didn't just cuff a family member in front of Nana's centerpiece. I stayed silent, not just because I'd been trained for it, but because the entire table had already made up their minds. There was no point wasting words on people who only listened to the version of you they wanted to believe in the first place. 12 minutes. That's how long the base response clock usually runs before the next level gets triggered. What Chloe didn't realize was that by cuffing me, detaining me without jurisdiction, and tampering with federal materials, all while I was on classified leave status, she'd escalated it beyond family drama. She'd started something she couldn't walk back. I adjusted my weight again. Subtle. My left wrist had gone slightly numb. Jessica looked over for a moment, then looked back at her plate. No one was talking anymore. The food was getting pushed around more than eaten. Even Uncle Kevin, who usually couldn't shut up about fantasy football, was quiet now. That's when it happened. Not loud, not dramatic. No knock. Just the soft creak of the back door. Chloe heard it, but she didn't react. She probably thought it was wind or Nana's ancient wood frame shifting like it always did. But I knew better. They were inside now, and they weren't here to debate. They were here to verify. At that stage of protocol, one or two agents observe and confirm contact. They enter low visibility. No uniforms, no ID tags, just behavior and body placement. The goal is simple: figure out whether this is a misunderstanding or a threat. In this case, Chloe had already answered that question for them. She stood finally and turned toward the hallway. Nana, did you hear something? No answer. She walked 3 steps toward the kitchen, stopped and squinted like she was waiting for an animal to dart across the floor. Then a voice spoke from just beyond the doorframe. Male, calm. Ma'am, I need you to put down your weapon. Chloe froze. I don't have a weapon, she said instinctively. You're wearing a service weapon on your right hip, the voice replied. Remove it and set it on the table. Slowly. Everyone at the table looked up at once. What the hell? Kevin muttered. Chloe stepped forward. Who are you? Another voice this time, female controlled. We're here on federal authority. Please comply. Chloe reached for her badge. Don't do that, the male voice warned. She hesitated. I watched her eyes shift, trying to process, trying to place the situation in her own mental hierarchy of control. But she didn't have one, because this wasn't her jurisdiction. And suddenly, she wasn't the one setting the pace. The female agent stepped into view. Plain clothes, dark jeans, neutral top, clean-cut, confident posture. I'm Agent Diaz. You need to disarm now. Chloe's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'd seen that look before, a mix of fear and entitlement crashing into a wall called consequence. The kind of look that never appears in a police academy brochure. I didn't do anything wrong, she finally said. Not what we're here to determine, Agent Diaz said. But you are interfering with a federal investigation. The room cracked like glass under pressure. Jessica gasped. Nana stood up too fast, and grabbed the back of her chair to steady herself. Chloe looked directly at me now. Her voice dropped into a whisper she didn't realize everyone could still hear. You called them. I didn't respond. Agent Diaz nodded toward me. She didn't have to. Chloe still hadn't disarmed. Agent Diaz stepped forward. Chief Vance, last chance. Place your weapon on the table. This is not a negotiation. The silence stretched. Then finally, Chloe unholstered her sidearm. She didn't slam it down. She set it there like it might break if she wasn't careful. Agent Diaz looked at me. Are you hurt? No, I said. Do you need medical attention? No. Chloe tried again. She's not who she says she is. I have files, a PI evidence. Diaz raised a hand. We've seen the folder. It's already in review. Your private investigation has compromised secure materials. That's now part of the case. Chloe's mouth opened, but she couldn't form a sentence. Agent Diaz turned toward the second agent, still out of view, and said, Go ahead. From behind the kitchen doorway, the male agent emerged. He held a small black device, tapped it once. I heard the magnetic lock on my cuffs disengage with a quiet click. My hands dropped free. No applause, just silence, and Chloe staring at the empty space where her certainty used to live. I rubbed my wrists, stepped back, and reached for a napkin from the table to wipe the red lines away. Then I picked up a roll chewed. Everyone else watched. No one moved. The agents didn't rush. They didn't yell. They didn't make threats, because people with real authority don't have to scream. They just show up and reset the room. I swallowed the last bite of that roll slower than I needed to, more deliberate than polite. Chloe hadn't moved. Her eyes were locked on the empty cuffs like they'd just undone her entire existence, which in a way they had. Agent Diaz remained calm. She nodded once, then turned to face the front hallway. She didn't say anything, didn't make an announcement. She didn't have to. The front door opened from the outside. No knock, just authority wrapped in silence. Boots crossed the threshold. Heavy, measured steps. Not rushed, not unsure. A tall man walked in gray hair, under a black field cap, sharp jaw, shoulders too square to be anything but career military. His uniform wasn't standard issue. It was dress-down command wear. Tactical, efficient, unmistakable. General Robert Morrison. 3 stars. Sanford, North Carolina, meet the chain of command. I stood up straighter without meaning to. My spine reacted before my brain caught up. Conditioned reflex. You don't slouch around Morrison. The room fell silent. Not just quiet, still. Even Nana sat down without realizing it. Morrison scanned the room like he was running an internal briefing. In his head, calculating exits, reading body language, clocking every minor threat and detail. Then he saw me and nodded. That was it. A nod from him was louder than any speech. He stepped forward past the frozen faces, past the untouched plates, and barely sipped wine glasses. The only sound was the click of his boots on hardwood. He stopped 2 feet in front of me, raised his right hand and saluted. Crisp, full standard. General Vance, he said. We've been briefed. Are you all right? The sound of that name hit harder than any accusation Chloe had thrown all night. General Vance, me, my name, my rank, out loud in front of everyone. I returned the salute measured and clean. All clear, sir. His hand dropped. So did the illusion. The illusion that I was lying, that I'd faked my career, that I was some washed-up fraud playing dress-up with clearance codes. Chloe looked like she'd just seen a ghost. What did you call her? She asked, barely breathing. Morrison didn't even look at her. He turned to Agent Diaz instead. Are we secure? Yes, sir. No threats inside. Civilian materials recovered and logged. Good. He finally acknowledged Chloe. His eyes didn't blink. You're the one who initiated the arrest. Yes, she said. I was acting in good faith. Good faith? He repeated flatly, based on information obtained from an unlicensed private investigator, unauthorized entry into a secure storage property, and printed documents stolen from a classified materials container. Chloe opened her mouth, closed it again. This is a breach of multiple federal statutes, he said, and a direct interference with active Department of Defense operations. You've compromised an agent under a sealed directive. I didn't know, she said quietly. You didn't ask, he corrected. She looked to Mom, then to Nana, like either of them could save her from what was coming next. Neither moved. Morrison looked back at me. You still want this handled quietly? I nodded. For now. He accepted that. No questions, no explanation required. That's what rank buys you, not privileged trust. He turned toward the rest of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, this situation is under federal review. What occurred here tonight will be documented and statements will be taken. You are all instructed not to share details publicly, including on social media. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. People obeyed because people always obey someone who doesn't ask twice. He looked back at Chloe. We'll need your service weapon. She didn't move. Diaz stepped forward, took it from the table, cleared the chamber, then slid it into an evidence pouch. Morrison continued. You are to remain in Sanford under temporary suspension until formal review. Do not leave the county. Do not make contact with outside parties until authorized. He paused. You were warned, he said flatly. Then he looked at me again. His tone softened by half a degree. I'll arrange escort for transport when you're ready. Appreciate it, sir. With that, he turned and walked back through the front door. No ceremony, no drama, just finality and silence. You could feel the narrative cracking in everyone's minds, a collective rewriting of what they thought they knew. Chloe didn't speak. Couldn't. Because now the facts weren't in her control. I sat back down slowly. Chloe stayed standing still, cuffless but exposed. She wasn't the one who got arrested, but somehow, she was the one who looked trapped. Nobody clapped. Nobody apologized. Nobody even asked if I was okay. They just stared as if I'd suddenly become a stranger to them. Not because I'd lied, but because they finally realized I never had. The front door shut behind General Morrison, but the air in the dining room didn't move. It just sat there heavy and still, like nobody wanted to be the first to breathe. Chloe was still standing. Her face was pale, but not the kind of pale that comes from fear. It was the kind that comes when the room you thought belonged to you suddenly doesn't. She looked around like waiting for anyone to explain how this wasn't real, that this was just some overreaction. No one stepped in, not even Mom. Especially not Mom. Agent Diaz remained near the kitchen entrance, one hand resting casually near her hip, not near a weapon, just steady. Like nothing happening here surprised her because it didn't. This wasn't the first family dinner gone nuclear she'd probably walked into. Diaz pulled a slim black folder from her side bag and placed it gently on the table between the centerpiece and the mashed potatoes. She flipped it open, revealing a stack of glossy photo prints, a few documents with barcodes, and one heavily redacted incident report. She looked at Chloe. We reviewed everything your private investigator turned over. Chloe blinked. Do you want the legal version or the plain English? Chloe didn't answer. Diaz continued. Anyway, your investigator illegally accessed a federally secured storage unit by misrepresenting himself to a property manager. He breached biometric security using a manual override you were not authorized to know about, let alone exploit. I didn't know he did it at your request, Diaz said sharply. We have the techs. That shut her up. Diaz kept going. He opened classified containers, handled restricted materials without clearance, and took photos of federal assets linked to an active operation. You printed those materials. You compiled them in this folder. She tapped the red binder Chloe had proudly waved around earlier. Then you distributed them unsecured at a civilian gathering. You displayed them in front of minors. You repeated unverified claims in a public setting and attempted to use that as justification to detain a federal officer whose records are sealed under Title 10, Section 128B. Silence. Chloe's throat worked like she was trying to swallow something too sharp. Directive what? Mom finally whispered, but no one answered her. Diaz turned the last page. All of this constitutes unauthorized possession of federal property, obstruction of a classified transfer, and unlawful detainment of a government official. Jessica leaned forward slightly. Wait, you're saying Chloe committed a crime? Diaz didn't look away from Chloe. We're saying she committed several. You could almost hear the emotional rug getting yanked out from under the entire table. I didn't know, Chloe said again. I thought she was lying. I thought she was hiding something. She was, Diaz replied. It was her job. The words hit harder than if she'd shouted them. Everyone just sat there, trying to replay the last 20 minutes in reverse, hoping the math would come out differently. But it wouldn't, because it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a federal offense. Diaz slid the folder back into her bag. Formal charges will be filed pending review. You'll be contacted within 72 hours. Chloe's face tightened. You're not taking me in. That's not my call, Diaz said. But for now, you're no longer in charge of this narrative. It was the cleanest cut I'd ever seen anyone deliver in a room full of people who used to call themselves family. She turned to me. General Vance, do you wish to provide a statement at this time? No. Would you like to press charges directly? I looked at Chloe, at Mom, at Nana, at every single face that had watched me stand in handcuffs, and said nothing. No, I said. Diaz nodded, no judgment in her expression. Chloe exhaled like maybe she thought I was doing her a favor. I wasn't. I just didn't need the satisfaction. She'd already ruined herself. Diaz stepped aside. The second agent reappeared. Same steady, unreadable posture. They exited without another word, slipping through the hallway like smoke. The door clicked softly shut. Still, no one moved. Not until Kevin cleared his throat. So, does this mean dinner's over? Jessica elbowed him hard. Nana finally spoke. Chloe, sit down. But she didn't. She just stood there, her hands trembling now, not from fear, but from disbelief, like she still couldn't process that the room she once commanded had turned against her in under half an hour. She looked at Mom, who gave her nothing. Then she looked at me. I just wanted the truth, she whispered. No, I said. You wanted to be right. That landed harder than any court order, because that was the truth. Always had been. Chloe didn't want answers. She wanted the narrative to serve her, and when it didn't, she tried to control it. Dress it up. Force it into a shape that made sense to her bruised ego and her small-town badge. But some stories don't bend. They break. And she was the one left holding the shards. The silence turned stiffer when Diaz and the second agent left the house. But nobody stood. Nobody dared to be the first to speak in a room still echoing with the weight of that one sentence. You committed several. Amelia stayed frozen next to the table like her body hadn't caught up to the consequences yet. Her badge, her literal identity, was no longer on her hip, no longer hers. That little rectangle of metal that she used to walk into every room, like she owned the place, had just become evidence. She finally lowered herself into the nearest chair, the one next to Mom. Not her usual spot. Her usual spot was the head of the table where she'd started this evening, acting like queen of some sad suburban kingdom. Now she looked like a dethroned pageant winner who'd bitten off more than just the sash. And Mom? She didn't move. Didn't even glance at her. She just folded her napkin in her lap, like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. You'd think someone would try to comfort Chloe. No one did. Not because they hated her, but because nobody knew where to stand anymore. If they defended her, they looked complicit. If they comforted me, they'd have to admit they'd been wrong for years. So everyone just sat there. Nana reached for the salt like her roast wasn't slowly congealing, next to an overturned butter knife. Jessica took another bite of green beans she clearly didn't want. And someone refilled the wine. Chloe broke the quiet. You didn't have to humiliate me. I didn't even flinch. I didn't. She blinked like that didn't compute. You triggered a federal response, detained a sealed officer, then leaked classified material to half a dozen civilians and live-streamed the buildup like it was your big moment. I said flatly. Humiliation was your goal. It just didn't end the way you wanted. She looked like she wanted to argue, but what could she say? I hadn't even touched her, hadn't raised my voice, hadn't said more than a handful of words all night. The wreckage was entirely hers. She turned toward Mom. I was trying to protect this family. Mom didn't speak. Not at first. Then quietly she said, "From what?" Chloe opened her mouth, but no words came out. "You thought she was lying." Mom continued, eyes still down. "You wanted her to be lying." She was lying. She kept secrets. Secrets are part of her job. Mom said, still not looking up. But you didn't care about the job. You cared that she didn't answer to you. That broke something. A visible crack in Chloe's posture. She looked away, lips pressed so tight they went pale. It would have been easier if Mom had yelled, if Nana had cried, if Uncle Kevin had thrown something. But they didn't. Because truth doesn't need volume. It just needs room. And now that Chloe was no longer the loudest voice at the table, everyone could finally hear what had been building for years. The fact that I had left this family not out of pride, but out of survival. That every skipped Thanksgiving wasn't arrogance, it was damage control. That every silence wasn't distance, it was strategy. That coming home meant exposing myself to a war zone more chaotic than any combat zone I'd ever seen. And now, with her badge gone, Chloe had nothing left to hide behind. She turned to me again. "You're not even angry." I met her eyes. "You're not worth it." Another cut. Clean, sharp, necessary. I wasn't being cruel. I was being efficient. That's what training does. It strips emotion from execution. And for once, Chloe wasn't the one in uniform. Nana tried to bridge the moment. "Maybe we can all just breathe for a second." I didn't, because there was nothing left to exhale. The damage had already been done. Not tonight, years ago. Tonight was just the paperwork finally catching up. Mom stood up slowly. She reached for her purse, then looked at me. Her voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. "I'm driving home." "You're welcome to stay at my place," Nana offered softly. Mom nodded, then looked at me and said nothing. Not a sorry, not a thank you, not even a good night, just a long pause that tasted like regret, but smelled like habit. She turned and walked toward the door. Chloe didn't follow. I stayed seated. Jessica looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. No one else moved. Outside, I heard Mom's car door shut. The ignition started. She pulled away. And that was it. No hugs? No, we'll talk later. No resolution, just space. Finally, I stood up, walked over to the sideboard, and poured myself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher Chloe had mocked me for buying her 3 birthdays ago. She said it was too fancy for this house. Maybe it was, but I drank from it anyway. The courthouse in Lee County wasn't built for spectacle. It looked like someone had taken a DMV, a church, and a tax office, jammed them together, and called it civic architecture. Beige walls, worn carpet, bad coffee. It was 8 months after the dinner. Chloe walked into the courtroom wearing a muted gray blazer and her old patrol boots. No badge, no service weapon, just a woman trying to look like the thing she used to be. She didn't look at me when she entered. I didn't expect her to. The room wasn't packed. Just a handful of local reporters. One sketch artist who clearly hadn't wanted this assignment, and the kind of public observers who show up to court the way others go to garage sales hoping to catch something unexpected. The charges had stacked up quietly: unauthorized possession of federal documents, obstruction of classified operations, unlawful detainment of a federal officer, and maybe, most ironic of all, impersonation of federal jurisdiction. She'd argued it down to 2 felony counts and 1 misdemeanor. Her lawyer, a lean man in a wrinkled blue suit, who looked like he split his time between DUIs and tax fraud, did most of the talking. I didn't say a word. I was called to testify. I declined. I'd already submitted a written statement sworn sealed enough to make it clear where the law stood. The court didn't need a performance, and I wasn't giving her another audience. From the bench, the judge asked Chloe if she had anything she wanted to say before sentencing. She stood, hands clenched at her sides. "I thought I was protecting people," she said. That was it. No tears, no apologies, not even a direct acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just that same loop she'd always lived in, where intention erased impact, and being right mattered more than being responsible. The judge nodded, once unmoved. 12 years, 5 minimum with eligibility for parole. Probation afterward, no firearms, no public office, mandatory counseling. She didn't cry. I wasn't sure if it was pride or shock, but she just stared ahead, blinking slower than usual, like her brain was trying to record every moment, so she could explain it differently later. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. She didn't shake it off, but she didn't acknowledge it either. The courtroom cleared quickly. No one was there to linger. I waited until the hall was empty before I left. As I stepped outside, the sun hit hard, a spring glare off a parking lot full of old sedans and state-issued license plates. There was no press waiting, no one shouting questions, just air. And it tasted like freedom. Not because she was going to prison, but because I wasn't carrying her choices anymore. On the drive back, I didn't play music, didn't call anyone, didn't even stop for coffee. Just silence and road. The kind that unspools behind you like closure. Mom didn't come to court. She'd sent a message through Nana. "Tell her I hope this brings her peace." I didn't respond. Peace isn't a gift someone else gives you. It's something you build one boundary at a time. And the final one had just been laid in federal sentencing paperwork. I got back to the base late that night. Security let me through without comment. Nobody saluted. Nobody asked where I'd been, because the job didn't care what my sister did, only what I did next. That's how the real world works. The past might make you, but it never excuses you. I logged back into my system, cleared the alerts, and resumed my role. Ops had run smoothly while I was gone. I wasn't missed, and that was exactly how I trained my team to function. Dependable, efficient, quiet. Later, I found a letter in my on-base mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Chloe's. Inside was a short note. "I didn't know you were really someone. I thought you just left because you hated us. I still don't understand why you never said anything, but I guess that's who you are now. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you do, I'm sorry." That was it. No signature, no plea for forgiveness, just a half confession scribbled on lined notebook paper. Like we were back in high school. I held it for maybe 30 seconds, then fed it directly into the shredder behind my desk. The blades didn't hesitate because I wasn't here to offer closure. I was here to continue, and not one part of me needed to carry her voice with me to do that. The match flared fast. It caught the corner of the paper before I'd even set it down in the tray. A yellow tongue curling up the edge like it had been waiting 2 years for oxygen. I didn't watch the whole thing burn, just the start. The handwriting was still familiar. Tight loops slanted right the kind of cursive she used on Christmas tags. The last word I saw before the flame blurred, it was sorry. It didn't matter anymore. That letter wasn't the first. There had been 3 before it, all sent from FCI Elton in Ohio, each more polite than the last, each one gently rewriting her version of events. Less about taking responsibility, more about shaping memory. The first one I opened. The second one I skimmed. The third, I didn't even break the seal. This one I burned not out of spite, but because I didn't need reminders of someone trying to make amends with words they'd never used when it counted. I wasn't angry. That had faded the same way noise does when you close the door to a room you've already left. 2 years had passed. I'd been promoted twice, transferred once, took on a hybrid role between intel ops and liaison work. More planning, less field. Clean hours, sharper suits. Fewer missions that involved sand in my teeth or waking up in third world bunkers with satellite phones for pillows. Life was quieter, but not softer. Because peace doesn't mean ease. It just means you've stopped bleeding in places no one else can see. Chloe's name only came up twice since the trial, once during a personnel security check, and once when Mom called to ask if I could visit Nana's nursing home for her 90th. I went. I sat with Nana for 47 minutes, read to her from her favorite spy novel. She didn't know the irony, and promised I'd send her the next one. She asked about Chloe. I told her the truth. She's still alive. That was enough. We didn't talk about the rest because sometimes, even at 90, you know which silences deserve to stay untouched. Back at base, my unit knew not to bring up the Sanford situation. The new officers had no idea. The old ones respected the boundary. That's how you survive in this line of work. You control the story before someone else writes it for you. That night, after burning the letter, I sat on my patio. Simple chair, coffee mug, cool air. I didn't think about Chloe, not directly, but I thought about how much space we give people who don't deserve the lease. How long we carry ghosts because someone once told us that family means forever, even when the rent's unpaid. She wasn't my ghost anymore. She was just a case file, one that had been closed, logged and placed in a cabinet I no longer opened. There was no satisfaction in that. No triumph, no vengeance, just release. And that's what made it real. Because revenge isn't always about explosions and confrontations. Sometimes it's just healing in a room they'll never be allowed into again. Sometimes it's letting the letter burn and not needing to watch the ashes. The screen in front of me blinked twice before settling into a secure feed. Intel briefs poured in satellite imagery. Encrypted reports projected patterns across eastern corridors. The war room smelled like coffee rubber and silent pressure. I was home. Not the kind you're born into, the kind you build. One clearance code, one threat diffused, one operation completed at a time. Ma'am, incoming from Fort Meade. Intel file ST-2049. I nodded. Run it. My voice didn't raise. It didn't need to. The people in this room knew what I was, not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. I stood at the front of the command table now. No longer the shadow figure behind the briefings. No longer the name buried under layers of sealed orders. No longer someone's sister. Just General Vance. Clean, defined, respected. Two junior officers flanked me, both under 30, both sharp-eyed and cautious in the way people are when they realize they've just stepped into a room where decisions cost lives. The file popped onto the screen. Another surveillance escalation. Possible cross-border movement. Nothing urgent yet, but it would be. It always was. My hand hovered over the digital map, dragging two zones into alignment. "This corridor is soft," I said. "They'll exploit it in 72 hours unless we patch it." "Yes, ma'am." Someone answered, already typing. I stepped back, let the team move. That's the secret no one tells you about leadership. It's not about barking orders. It's about setting systems in motion so well that you can walk away and they still run smooth. I left the room 20 minutes later. My boots echoed in the hallway. Not heavy, not loud, just present. A junior staffer from logistics passed me in the corridor. He saluted quickly, a little too nervous. "General." I nodded back. No lecture. He'd find his calm eventually. I reached my office, entered the passcode, and closed the door behind me. Silence. Real silence. The kind where nobody's watching you for weakness, and nobody's about to betray you over pork roast and family pride. I stood by the window. Sunlight cut across the airfield. A jet refueled on the tarmac. Wind caught a loose corner of a tarp, snapping it once, then settling again. Somewhere in a federal facility, Chloe was 2 years into a 12-year sentence. Maybe sweeping floors, maybe working admin, maybe still rewriting the story in her head about how she meant well. Didn't matter. We hadn't spoken since that last letter. No calls, no requests. I'd blocked the number assigned to her facility because of what was left to say. People always think revenge is about destroying the other person. They're wrong. It's about refusing to carry what they tried to hand you. She gave me shame. I gave it back. She gave me guilt. I walked around it. She gave me accusation. I gave her silence. And in that silence, I built something else. This. A room full of classified intelligence, sharp minds, and clean lines. A world where my name didn't need defending anymore. A knock tapped once on the door. "Enter." It was Colonel Jordan. 6 years my junior, competent as hell, and always slightly suspicious that I could read his mind. "Ma'am, the SecDef just approved your nomination for Joint Strategic Operations." I didn't blink. "Good. We'll need your file finalized by end of week." "I'll have it by Thursday." He hesitated. "Anything else you need from me?" "Yeah," I said, walking back to my desk. "Find someone else to organize the command holiday party. Last year's playlist nearly ended morale." He smiled. "Copy that, ma'am." The door closed behind him. I sat down, pulled out a fresh yellow notepad from my drawer. Not to write about her, not to remember, just a plan. Because this life wasn't built on memory. It was built on momentum. And I had no interest in looking back. Sometimes, the people who share your blood will try to define you by the pieces of yourself they never bothered to understand. They'll mock your silence, question your path, rewrite your choices into stories that make them feel more righteous. But the truth is, you don't owe them a version of yourself they can accept. You owe yourself a life you can stand inside with your spine straight, your name intact, and no need to explain it to anyone who lost the right to ask. I didn't need revenge. I just needed out. And now I'm exactly where I was always meant to be. Not because of them, but in spite of them. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't on a battlefield. It's that the family you're born into isn't always where you belong. True family is the one you build a fortress of loyalty and trust you create for yourself. This story is for anyone who's had to build their own safe harbor. If that's you, leave a single heart below. Because every heart is a beacon, showing others they're not alone in the dark. Subscribe and join us as we turn our stories into a source of strength. Until next time, hold your ground. Your peace is worth defending.